there. So I'm honoured to welcome once more on Words of Wisdom journalist, novelist, and screenwriter Ray Connolly. Welcome, Ray.
Hello.
Your first screenplay, That'll Be the Day, was a collaboration with David Putnam. I believe you were both initially inspired by one of Nilsson's songs, 1941.
I'll tell you what happened. I went to borrow a book off David. David was a friend who I'd actually met through Mike McCartney. And he was a friend, and I knew that he'd been in New York recently and bought the Jerry Hopkins book on Elvis. And I needed that for some of the thing I was writing for the Evening Standard. And I went around to his house and gave me the book. And he said, "What else are you doing?" I said, "Well, I've just written a new novel, and what else?" He said, "Well," I said, "That's it." And he said, "Well, it's been," I know, it had been bought by a film company. He said, "Oh, I thought you were going to write your first screenplay for me," joke. And I said, "I don't even know how to write a screenplay. I've never even seen a screenplay. I've written film reviews, but I've never seen a screenplay." He said, "I'll tell you." So he told me very quickly, and he said, "Why don't you write one for me?" I said, "Well, maybe. Any ideas?" He said, "Well, that song by Harry Nilsson, you know, the one about Happy Father Had a Son, yeah, 1944, kids walked out the door, all that." So I said, "Yeah, I know that one." He said, "Maybe there's a film there, do you think?" Because my dad never came back from the war. His father came back. My father died in the war. His father came back, and he remembers that distinctly, his dad coming home from the war. And so he thought, what happens if, you know? So anyway, we talked on that thing about me being brought up by a woman who had a shop. Although she didn't sell sweets and tobacco, she sold ladies' frocks and things, dresses and knickers and all that sort of stuff. And so that's, and then he sort of said, "Well, tell you what, you write one for me, and we'll think along that lines about Happy Father Had a Son, and you know, and the father leaves home. What happened to the son? You know?" And yeah, we did. And I went home and I thought, I can't believe it. I'll just best write a film. And so I began writing day after day. After, you know, I had to do a full day's work. So I was writing in the evening, and I did. And David would come round for his breakfast about 2 or 3 mornings a week and see what I'd written overnight. And I was knackered. And it sort of went very, very well. And we worked very, very, very closely. When the film came out, it should have said, and I said this at the time, story by Ray Connolly and David Putnam. But he didn't want that. He wanted, "I want to be the producer. I'm the producer, you're the writer." And that's how we left it. But we worked so closely together on the story on the story, not on the screenplay, but on bits and pieces of ideas. So David deserved all the credit he ever got for anything, because he was a great producer to work with. And to start off with a great producer was really helpful to me, because I've written screenplays since, here in Hollywood, everything, and you never get that kind of attention and that sort of enthusiasm that David Putnam gave me. I wish he did, but I didn't. I never did. And so that's how it happened. You know, we had an idea and we did it. And later on, I'd written it, and it was really about a very selfish boy called Jim McLean, really, who doesn't do one decent thing in the entire film. He just really doesn't. And we thought, we'll never get the money for this. And then David Putnam went to see Godspell. It had David Essex in it. And he rang me the next morning and said, "We found our boy. People will like him so much because he's so good looking. People are going to like him. They'll give him anything, even when he does in the film." And they did. That's how that happened.
And the film was largely financed by Ronco. And to do that, you needed to come up with a soundtrack, cramming in 40 tracks from the period.
That's not quite true. The film was financed. No, the film was financed by EMI Films, and with the backing of the National Film Finance Consortium. They paid for it, but we needed more money. And Ronco was a tiny record company. We'd never heard of it. they were selling things like hair dryers and stuff like that online. I mean, on television, in those commercials. And so David rang one day and he said, "I've got this guy in Canada, I think it was. They're going to put some money into the film, but we have to have like 40 rock and roll tracks on it." And in my mind, we'd got about 6. And I said, "No, 40. How are we going to do that?" And he said, "Well, think about it." So I got the script out again, went through it, and wrote in where we could put 40 rock and roll tracks. And that's how that happened. That was literally. So I know the album was like a #1 album for ages. I mean, everybody you met had a copy of That'll Be the Day album. But actually, it was an afterthought, and that was there to find the money. But also, well, they did it brilliantly. They when the film came out, they advertised the album by showing bits of the film, and perfect. And that was shown all around the country on ITV every night for ages. And it was a #1 album, much to our astonishment. And funny enough, David Essex didn't even sing in it. He just looked great, you know.
In fact, the album was so successful that the charts company changed the rules after its long stay at #1, and they banned various artist albums from appearing in the album charts ever again.
I didn't know that, and I'm glad that we got there first then, because it was just great to go into W.H. Smith and see a big pile of That'll Be the Days. And I said to them, because W.H. Smith didn't actually put it on the chart list on the wall. You know, it might be #1 Beatles tune. And I said, "Well, why don't you put That'll Be the Day? Because that's big." They said, "Oh, you don't even need that, do you?" And I said, "Well, hang on. You don't need it, but I'd really like it. It'd be really great, wouldn't it?" But anyway, yeah. So, but it was I think Record Mirror had it #1 for a long time. And so I bought Record Mirror every week after that.
Ringo Starr was perfectly cast in the film. How did you and David go about securing Ringo to act in the movie?
I mean, the whole thing is strokes of luck. Luck was actually me borrowing a book from David, him having this idea. Next bit of luck, seeing David Essex on stage, and we thought he's so good looking and so nice. And then the third one was I'd never been to Butlins, and David hadn't either. And yeah, I'd written all these scenes in Butlins. I'd got the general idea from people who'd been there, you know. So we did, and David said, I said, "Well, Ringo went to Butlins because he played there with Rory Storm, whatever he's called, yeah." And so I said, "Why don't we go and talk to Ringo?" So I rang Derek Taylor at Apple and said, "We want to meet Ringo and talk to him about Butlins." He said, "Okay, I'll arrange it." So I mean, it was that easy, though. You can't believe it, can you? That easy. And so we went round to #3 Savile Row. We had lunch, which is a couple of beers, I think, and a couple of sandwiches with Ringo and Neil Aspinall, who was then he had been the road manager of the Beatles, but he was now the managing director of Apple. Derek Taylor, we all sat there, and Ringo and Derek and Neil told us so many funny stories, none of which appeared in the film because they couldn't have been. Because I mean, some of them, you know, they're sort of stories that boys tell each other. Like, and guess what happened? Oh my God, yeah. So we didn't use them, but they made us laugh so much, and it was so funny. And on the way out, we sort of talked about Putnam was going to offer Ringo the part that Billy Fury had. And but on the way out, we sort of thought, well, maybe he could play the part of Mike, who was the guy on the fairground. David said, "Do you think he could do it?" I said, "I don't know. I mean, it was very good in a hard day's night. He might be able to do it." No, and you know. So I thought we could test him. We didn't test him. David offered him the part, and David said he jumped at it. He wanted to do it, which was great. And he turned up the first day in his Teddy Boy outfit. He had specially made for Magical Mystery Tour launch party, and it's all drapes and things, and everything, which is very amusing. But yeah, and he was just terrific. I mean, he should have done more. He should really have done more.
I agree. It was probably the best film role that Ringo had, wasn't
Probably. No, not probably. It was.
it?
The others were terrible. I mean, it made some terrible films. I also thought that David Essex didn't fulfill his potential in films because after Stardust, he didn't do. I think he did one other film or something. Not much. Anyway, and he was so good looking. David could have been a really big film star in the UK, and but he fell in love with the idea of being a rock star, which is all right, but rock stars have a life of 7 years maximum, unless you're Elvis Presley and go on forever. But or the Beatles, everybody else 7 years, but that's it. And the kids want somebody else.
Do you think that was a case of life imitating art after David appeared in Stardust?
Yeah. I mean, it was exciting, and he could sing. He could sing, and he looked great, and all those things. And so, the last scene in Stardust it's stolen. Actually, here's the truth: it was stolen from Quatre Cents Coups, the Francois Truffaut film about a boy running away again. And in the film, in Quatre Cents Coups, 400 Blows in English, what happens? He runs away into the sea and then looks back like that. Just that moment like that. And I thought, and then we freeze. And I thought, that's it. We should freeze on him at some moment. Now, in my mind, he was going to do it down the street and then just turn and look back. But actually, Claude Wattham did it in the record shop. He gets a guitar and says, "I'll be all right now." And then we freeze, but it was stolen. There were so many scenes that I stole from other places that were, which is what you do, I mean.
Well, a bit like the Beatles, really. They used to borrow things and nick things left, right, and centre, but they created something that was so much better than what they borrowed from.
Yeah, I didn't improve on Quatre Cents Coups. In case anyone's thinking, I couldn't improve on Francois Truffaut. Anyway, go on, sorry.
You're too modest there, but I can see you were thinking about it for a moment. So just after the filming Rat, so that'll be the day, Ringo went into the recording studios to make the album that turned out to be the first album featuring all four of the Beatles. Was there pressure to finish filming at a certain time? And did Ringo talk about what he was about to do?
No, there was pressure to finish filming because he was so good, and I think we had him for maybe about 10 days. That's all, and the film was lasted over 6 weeks. So the film was scheduled around his availability, and those 10 days were available, and we realized we were going to do all we needed to do in 9 days. So David Putnam said, Raymond, can you write another scene for him? Because he's so good, I want more of him. So I said, all right. So I wrote a scene in the pool hall where he and David Essex are playing pool. And and so we did that. But it was getting late in the evening, and he just suddenly said, I'm not finished. I've got to get the ferry back, because we were shooting in the Isle of Wight, and the ferry went at like 10:30. He said, I'm not going to miss the ferry, If we're not finished, we're not finished. That's it. And so you better get it right then, and this, because that's it. And I just realized that I thought, that's kind of interesting, that because to me, that was the biggest thing that ever happened to me. It was a huge, a film. I couldn't believe it. I've written a film was being made with Beatle in it too. But he'd seen bigger days. He'd had bigger things. He'd done Shea Stadium. He'd done the Hollywood Globe, all these things. And so it wasn't that big a deal for him. It was for us. But then it was great because he got all such great reviews. And I really thought, he's going to use these to launch a second career, which he could well have done. He could really have done it, but he didn't. So,
And of course, there are not one but two incredible drummers featured in the film. What was it like working with Keith Moon?
Keith is, Keith with crackers. Friendly enough, crackers. I don't know whether, I think he actually played the drums in that other day. I mean, that would have been recorded separately, I mean, that's how you do things, that the musicians were miming when they on screen, but they'd recorded all the stuff separately. So in Stardust, Dave Edmunds played the drums, not Keith. That would have driven Keith mad, but he did for purely technical reasons. Anyway, Keith was he was lovable, all these things, very nice. And when we got to Stardust, it could be a bit of a pain. I mean, because he had a much bigger part and he could mess things around. I mean, and as much as you liked him, there were moments when he could be really irritating. And I'm sure who found all the time. And I remember one night, everyone goes on about this. One night we were in Bellevue, Manchester. It was late, like 2 a.m, and one shot had to be the boys, the Stray Cats, David Essex, Keith and West, running past up the steps behind that. One shot, but it had to be lit, which takes a long time, it's all these lights and everything. And I'm sitting there waiting on the steps thinking, oh, it's cold. And the director, Michael Apted on Stardust, said, Raymond, will you just make sure these boys stay here? Because Keith would wander off, where is he now? So I said, okay. And Keith heard him and came across and said, Raymond, are you looking after us? I said, fuck off, Keith. Something like that. And he said, what do you say? I said, fuck off. And he came to hit me. And as he did, his blow is coming at me, almost like play fighting, like kids. And I fell back on the steps. And he fell down. And I thought, this drummer hit me. So I began to punch him. And the big crowd of all the Sparks got round and the technical people. And the makeup guy said, don't hit his face, he's been made up. Whatever you want, but don't hit his face because, I have to do it all over again. Next day, Keith and I were best friends again. It wasn't a real fight. It was sort of, it's in all the Who books, like how Ray Connolly hit Keith. No, it was a jokey fight. And we were best friends again. And he was a great mimic. He was all kinds of things, but he was crackers. The other great thing he did, I mean, it wasn't great at the time, but in Manchester, he would saw his hotel room door in half, then pull one half back and lean over it like a horse in a loose box, And people could walk past, so there's Keith, which of course the film had to pay for, new door, things like that. So he could be a problem, but he was kind of nice too. I mean, he wasn't unkind. He wasn't unkind. That's the important thing. It was all, in his mind, funny. I remember seeing him shortly before he died in the King's Road in a bar, sort of posh bar. And I was meeting somebody, and Keith's there. And of course, Keith sees me, and he comes and he's Raymond, big old brand and all that. But he was stoned, and he kept flicking pills in the air, swallowing them like a seal with fish in the zoo. And I thought, this doesn't look good, And he was found dead about a week later. So it was very sad.
Such a loss,
But he was talented guy.
I'm
Nice.
sure there can't have been too many people that told Keith Moon where to go as well. So you're quite unique there, or fairly unique, I would have thought.
Ignore the fun.
Okay. So I
It's
believe
funny.
one of the
It's
lines
funny.
in That'll Be the Day was inspired by
Predates
a car trip that you had with John and Yoko, where you were
what?
singing rock and roll songs together in the car.
Yeah, I mean, what was we were going through. I mean, we were upstate New York. It was, and we were going to. If you believe it, there's an Indian Native American reservation still in upstate New York. I never knew that, but there is. We were on the way there, and we got singing, going through all the Fats Domino things. Yes, me and I'm in love again. Things like that. Peggy Sue, all those sort of things. And John said, at one point, he said, if you'd been in my class at school, I'd had you in the quarrymen. And I said, my mother wouldn't have let me. She wouldn't have allowed it. She said, I'd have forced you to join to rebel against your mother. Is that the line you meant?
No, I think it's the line about the jukebox when you were all singing together
Oh,
and you asked them to sing one more song and they
yeah.
got a bit fed up at
Well,
that stage.
well, and it was we sang another one. I began another one. And he said, I'm not a fucking jukebox, you know. That's it. Yeah.
We said in a light-hearted way because John could often turn his mood could change in a moment, couldn't it? Sometimes.
They were always light-hearted with me. I
Hmm.
don't know. I mean, you know, he was a funny guy. But he couldn't resist a joke if he could see it coming. I mean, he wasn't. I mean, he could have said, "I don't want to sing anymore." What happened was she got bored, as she would, because these two teenage boys reliving their past and singing rock and roll songs. You know, it was kind of a bit tedious because she wasn't into rock and roll. She didn't understand it, and so you know, so when he sort of says, um, I'm not a fucking jukebox. It was, it meant that's it, we're finished. But it wasn't unkind. People often go on about, I mean, I read it all the time. It could be quite unkind. It was outspoken, but actually an awful lot. Do you remember those interviews in Rolling Stone when the Beatles broke up?
Yeah.
He did these long, long interviews, and they missed the point that actually he was being funny half the time, and and John would exaggerate like crazy. He always did that. That's what he did. He exaggerated, and and if you knew him well, you thought, well, I'm not like that because he doesn't really mean it. you know, it's. But of course, they wrote every word down as though it was the gospel truth, and half of it wasn't the gospel truth. Half of it was sort of a general idea. You know, I mean, there's one. What was it today? I thought of something he said today. He said, "Oh yeah, Yoko forced me to become avant-garde, and all I wanted was to be Tom Jones." That was a joke, but actually, if that had been in Rolling Stone, it would have been, "Oh, he wanted to be avant-garde. He wanted to be." He didn't. That was a joke. So he joked all the time.
Were there some elements of Jim McLean's character that were drawn from John Lennon at all?
Not John particularly. Other than that, actually, he had an artistic side to him. That I mean, he does say to his mother at one point, "I could go, I think early on, go to art college," and then later on, she should have actually gone to art college. But so he had an artistic. What I did because I can't draw, so I made him a poet. So I gave him poetry to say or to make up. I mean, silly little poet. I am alone, a lonely man lives upon the sand. Things like that. They weren't very good, but they they gave the idea that he could do more, and John could do more. John was very articulate. He was bright. Um, Although he got no O levels, not one. It's hard to believe because he was clever. Um, yeah, but that was John.
What did John make of the film? That'll Be the Day.
Well, at first he didn't. I'm not sure he ever actually saw. He was in America when it came out, and he wrote to me a couple of times saying, "When's your famous film coming out?" And I thought it should be there by now. So maybe he never saw it. I don't know. None of them have ever talked about it. Not Paul. I know Paul hadn't seen it. Years later, he said, I've never seen it. But see, it was a big deal for me, but for them, it was nothing. It was just a little film that Ray Connolly written with Ringo in it. You know, it wasn't that big. None of us knew at the time that people would be talking about it. You know, how long that's been. 50 years later, people are still asking me about it. You know, which I found astonishing, because it was all done in written. It took a long time to write. It took like a couple of, maybe 3 or 4 months. And when I'm writing, I'm endlessly fiddling, always changing, and going over and over and over, and adding bits, taking bits out. Yeah. But the shooting took 6 weeks dead, and that was it. And so it was, the people working on the thing, it was a small thing. And we had no idea it was going to be so popular. We won't be lucky.
So much so that you were commissioned to write the sequel, the so-called sequel, Stardust, which is quite a different movie in a slightly different time period as well. But sadly, Ringo declined to appear in Stardust because he thought it was too close to home.
That's what David Putnam told me. That was only a guess. We assumed that. We both thought, well, why is he not going to do it? Because he would have been very good. And instead, we got Adam Faith, who I didn't want. And I argued vociferously against Adam Faith, because I'd seen him in the TV thing. I mean, I couldn't stand that poor me, his record, what do you want? We don't want money. You're awful. And then I'd seen him in a television series where he played like a Cockney Sparrow, you know. Hello.
Budgie, that thing, wasn't it? Yeah.
Budgie, there you are.
Yeah.
Cockney Budgie. And I didn't want him. And David said, well, just meet him. And so Michael Apted, who's a new director, he wasn't sure. So we went along and met Adam. And he did to me what he does in the character does to you know, all the other characters in it. He talks them out of it, and he lets them down. You know, fancy a drink, and it was a bit of that, and that phrase became well known then. But I got it from nowhere, and I thought, how can I get a bit of this character? The next character, I thought, fancy a drink, and then I thought, well, use that one again, then again. So by the end of the film, you know that when he says that, they're dead. You know, so what Adam did that to me, really. So it was like fancy a drink, and he was brilliant. So I was dead wrong. He was really, really, really good. Whether Ringo would have been as good, I've no idea. He may not have been, because Adam had a great stillness. It was great on camera, great cheekbones. Remember that? Great cheekbones. If you look at him, this is important though. These things are important when you're looking at someone for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And it was a stillness that we found attractive. And also, it helped the film. Adam was the only one who got any nominations for any BAFTAs. And I thought Michael Apted should have got at least a nomination, because he did a fantastic job. And in those days, BAFTA didn't give, hard to believe this, didn't give awards to screenwriters, because, you know, that's just the way they were. And but I got one from the Writers Guild of Great Britain. That's for his original screenplay. But Michael Apted should have got one for, you know, because he did a fantastic job. And it seemed wrong.
Going back to That'll Be the Day, it was inspired by obviously Nilsson's song 1941 originally. I believe Nilsson appeared in the film, but actually ended up on the cutting room floor. How did that come about?
Well, he was always hanging around. So, I mean, he went down when we were filming in the Isle of Wight, and he didn't have a part. I mean, I hadn't written any parts for him, but he could have been in it. But he may be in the background. I've never even looked for him, but I mean, he may well have been. But he was he was a nice guy. Harry Nilsson was. He had a habit of a lot of drugs and a lot of drink, all those things. But when I knew him, and I knew him around that period, because he was in Apple quite a lot, and then he came down to Settlement of the Day and everything. But he was highly intelligent. This is the other thing about me. No one ever thinks that these guys could be intelligent. Some of them are really, really, really intelligent. You know, there's Harry was. He was a very bright fellow, which is always interesting because they're more fun to talk to. In truth, you know, if you've got more to talk about.
Well, if people want to learn more about your life and the great people that you've met over the years, there's your brilliant memoir, Born at the Right Time, which I urge people to go out and buy. Ray, thank you very much for talking to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.